This episode is brought to you by Cane's Donuts, celebrating 65 years as the best donuts in Boston. Follow Cane's on Instagram at Cane's_donuts to see why donuts are love.
The story out there on the street was he was drowned in a toilet and they brought him up on the bridge and they threw him off.
In this rundown, we're talking about the Charles Stuart murder, a white suburban couple shot in the Boston neighborhood of Roxbury, the manhunt, the motives, and the truth behind one of Boston's most notorious crimes. This is the Old Dirty Boston Podcast. On October 3rd, 1989, a Boston couple, Charles and Carol Stuart, were driving home after attending a childbirth class at Boston's Brigham and Women's Hospital. Carol, a tax attorney, was 7 months pregnant with their first child. After rolling to a stop at a red light in the rough neighborhood of Roxbury, Chuck Stewart said a black man wearing a tracksuit approached the car. He forced his way in and in a raspy voice ordered them to drive to the nearby neighborhood of Mission Hill, where he robbed and shot the couple, leaving them for dead. Chuck Stewart, who had been shot in the stomach, called 911. "My wife's been shot. I've been shot," he screamed into his car phone. Here's an excerpt from that call as Stewart tries to describe his location to the 911 operator.
Where are you right now, sir? Can you indicate to me?
No, I don't know. He made us go to an abandoned area.
Okay, sir. Can you see out the windows? Can you tell me where you are, please?
No. I don't know. I don't see any signs. Oh, God.
Are you near Brigham and Women's Hospital?
No, we went straight through.
Are you in the city of Boston, though?
Yes.
Can you give me any indication where you might be? Any buildings?
No.
Okay, has your wife been shot as well?
Yes, in the head.
In the head?
Yeah, I ducked down.
How long ago did you leave Brigham and Women's, sir? In what direction did you leave?
2 minutes, 3 minutes.
3 minutes from Brigham and Women's Center.
Okay, sir, bear with me now. Stand by. Stay on the phone with me.
Carol Stewart had been shot in the head and the stomach. In an even stranger twist, when Boston EMTs arrived on the scene, they were accompanied by a film crew. The CBS reality series Rescue 911 was riding along that night for an episode on Boston. They captured the scene on video, and you can actually watch the footage on YouTube of Carol being wheeled to the ambulance and Chuck straining to talk to EMTs. Carol passed away back at Brigham and Women's, where she had been just hours earlier. The couple's son was delivered prematurely by cesarean section, but passed away 17 days later. He was named Christopher. When news broke of the shooting, the city of Boston and the nation exploded in anger. Mayor Raymond Flynn said in a statement on October 24th, "I demand that the Boston Police Department to continue to be extremely aggressive in cracking down on people who are using guns to kill innocent people. It's intolerable. We will use every lawful tools to support our police officers in cracking down on gun-wielding criminals." More than 100 additional Boston police were assigned to scour Mission Hill, Roxbury, and Mattapan, with an aggressive stop-and-frisk approach to narrow down on a suspect who fit Chuck Stewart's description of the shooter as a black man with a raspy voice wearing a black tracksuit and red stripes. The search by law enforcement intensified, with Ray Flynn on television quoted as saying Boston police would get the animals responsible. WBUR's Dolores Handy wrote that mothers in the Mission Hill neighborhood complained of their sons being targeted. They were stopped on the street and forced to drop their pants as police searched for a suspect. Eventually, Boston police named a suspect, William Willie Bennett, a black man with a reputation in Mission Hill and a record of violent crime. Boston as a city is no stranger to racial tensions. Our city exploded in violence over the 1974 court ruling to implement forced busing across Boston public schools. Now, 15 years later, the murder of a well-to-do white pregnant suburban tax attorney seemed to reignite some of those tensions. Now back to Charles Stuart. At the time of the shooting, Chuck Stewart was managing a Furrier's on Newbury Street. He was rubbing elbows with some of Boston's wealthy elite, helping them buy their fur coats. Described by relatives as tall, handsome, and charismatic, Stewart had never been in trouble with the law. He was born and raised in Revere. He started out as a short-order cook in a bar and was working his way up to a six-figure salary. Stewart has been described as ambitious, highly focused on wealth, success, and his reputation. While Boston police were busy tearing through black neighborhoods hunting down a suspect, they may have overlooked the husband himself. Months before the shooting, Chuck Stewart had commented to friends that he might be better off if his wife were dead, that he wasn't ready to have children, and wished Carol had had an abortion. Chuck was also scheduled to receive $100,000 as a payout against Carol's life insurance policy. 73 days after the shooting, on January 4th, Chuck Stewart's youngest brother, Matthew, came forward to authorities with information that turned the case. Matthew told authorities that the night of the murder, he met his brother Chuck near the hospital and picked up a silver snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver as well as Carol's jewelry and handbag. Matthew said he thought his brother Charles was planning an insurance scam. Hours after his brother Matthew revealed the truth to police, Charles met with his lawyer. He then drove his car up onto the Tobin Bridge and left a note saying he was beaten by the situation and the new accusations had sapped all of his strength. Stuart then proceeded to jump over 140 feet to his death off the lower deck of the Tobin. His body was fished out by police the next day. In 1991, Matthew Stuart was indicted for obstruction of justice and insurance fraud for his role in the cover-up of the crime. Stuart pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison. He was released on parole in 97, but was later arrested for cocaine trafficking. On September 3rd, 2011, Matthew Stuart was found dead from an apparent drug overdose in Heading Home, a homeless shelter in Cambridge. Now that we know the truth, that Charles Stuart shot his pregnant wife in the head and stomach before turning the gun on himself and led Boston on a wild goose chase through the black neighborhoods of this city, the words he wrote for his wife's eulogy take on new meaning. Good night, sweet wife, my love. God has called you to his hands, not to take you away from me or the happiness and gladness you brought me, but to bring you away from the cruelty and the violence that fills this world. He said that for us to truly believe, we must know that his will was done and that there was some right in this meanest of acts. In our souls, we must forgive this sinner because he would too. Your husband, Chuck. Was Charles Stuart really asking for forgiveness for himself? Well, he didn't get it. Hope you burned in hell, motherfucker. Word got out that I was working on a story about Charles Stuart. Someone gave me a call with a tip. This is that call.
So where did you hear about the idea that Chuck Stewart was thrown off the bridge?
So growing up in Revere, the story out there on the street was he was drowned in a toilet and they brought him up on the bridge and they threw him off. And her family was pretty well connected with the guys in Revere and the guys in the North End, and it was the word on the street. I can't remember who specifically said it, but I've heard it from several people that are involved in, that lifestyle and the underworld stuff. And, I've heard it more than once throughout the years.
Well, somebody told me that too.
Yeah. Like I said, I've heard that several times. And like I say, I know for a fact that her family was pretty well connected because I know people that were close friends with her father, and like I say, it's not solid or concrete, but that's the word on the street.
You're listening to the Old Dirty Boston podcast.